Today, we're going to get into a really compelling story. It's not about a single person or one company, but about an entire American industry and its incredible fight for its very survival. And that really brings us to the big question, right? How does a whole industry pull itself back from the brink of total collapse? It's a heck of a story about innovation, about crisis, and ultimately about reinvention. All right, so every story has a beginning. And this one starts with a single game-changing idea, one that promised to completely revolutionize the world of construction. So at the very heart of this story is a product called EIFS. That stands for Exterior Insulation and Finish Systems. The easiest way to think about it is like a multi-layered skin for the outside of a building. Instead of your traditional brick or siding, this stuff offered amazing design flexibility and way better insulation. So, you see, this wasn't just a new material, it was a completely new way to build. The year is 1969. That's our starting point. And, while most of the world was looking up at the moon landing, a small group of people right here on Earth were laying the foundation for what would become a massive industry. And that's the thing you gotta remember. They weren't just improving something that already existed. No, they were creating an entire industry from the ground up, building a multi-billion-dollar business from scratch, with all the huge risks that come along with that. Okay, so after that initial spark, there was this period of just explosive growth. But as the industry got bigger and bigger, it started running into some really, really tough hurdles. You can kind of see the whole roller coaster ride right here on this timeline. Started small back in '69. Then just astonishing growth through the 80s and 90s. But then, look at the 2000s. That's when major existential threats nearly ended the whole thing, before it finally settled down and matured by 2019. And wow, saying the path was not smooth is putting it mildly. The road was incredibly bumpy. You know how it is, success attracts attention, and with that attention came a whole storm of problems that threatened to derail everything. First, they had to deal with Mother Nature. Big events, like Hurricane Andrew back in the 90s, didn't just test the physical limits of their product. They kicked off these huge public relations battles over just how durable it really was. And then, after a natural disaster, came a man-made one, the Great Recession. All of a sudden, construction across the entire country just ground to a halt. Demand for new building materials like EIFs, well, it pretty much evaporated overnight. It was a massive threat to the business. And if all that wasn't enough, there was this constant uphill battle for acceptance. See, they were the new kid on the block, and they had to fight tooth and nail to convince these skeptical architects, building owners, and code officials that their product wasn't just innovative, but that it was safe and reliable for the long haul.
So you take all those challenges, and they all led to this moment, the absolute climax of the story, a point where the entire industry was pushed right to the very edge. This quote really drives it home. We're not talking about a bad quarter or a few tough years here. We're talking about challenges so immense, they nearly wiped out the whole industry for good. So what was the final straw? What pushed them over the edge? Well, it was a widespread crisis in the residential business. Turns out, improper installation on thousands of homes led to moisture getting trapped behind the EIFS, causing rot and just massive damage. The lawsuits and the media firestorm that followed were absolutely catastrophic. But, and this is the amazing part, the story doesn't end there. Out of that crisis came a rebirth. This is the comeback story, the part about the big strategic pivot that actually saved them. Their strategic shift was nothing short of brilliant. They made this incredibly tough call to pivot away from the volatile residential business, the source of their biggest nightmare, and to rebrand and refocus entirely on the commercial market. The goal was to become a more mature, more resilient industry. So their path back basically followed a three-step playbook. First, they just had to survive the immediate fallout from the disaster. Second, they needed to completely rebrand and refocus. And finally, they used that whole crisis as a lesson to emerge smarter, tougher, and ultimately stronger than they were before. Now, what's so cool about this story is that it's not just about products or profit margins. It's really about the people who lived through all of it. And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? The hurricanes, the recession, the rebranding. Sure, those were the events.
But the real story is about the careers, the determination, and even the tragedies of the actual people who built this thing and then saved it. You know, when you pull it all together, it really is a classic American story. It's got everything: innovation, facing down incredible adversity, and in the end, survival and some really hard-won success. And the reason we can even tell this story is because it was all captured in a book called Behind the Walls. It was written by Buck Buchanan, an author who spent 40 years inside this world. He chronicles that entire 50-year journey, and he really focuses on the human element that made it all happen. So all this kind of leaves us with a final thought. This was the story of just one industry, but it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other incredible stories of struggle, survival, and success are literally built into the walls of the buildings we walk past every single day?